Kyle Larson. It was a great battle between those two. Kyle Larson takes the lead with 9 laps to go, set sail, had a nice 2-second lead before Truex ran out of gas, and Kyle Larson for Hendrick Motorsports wins their third race of the season for that 5 team, which I think is significant, guys. And we'll obviously get into the race itself and the repave and all of the calamity that we saw. But I think Larson's win also became incredibly notable for the fact that just 5 days prior, he had gotten the playoff waiver, and how quickly we would have found ourselves in this precarious situation, had he not been given the waiver. Okay, well, does he get those playoff points, and who gets those playoff points? And the win counts, but he's not playoff eligible. Now NASCAR, like how smart that decision was last Tuesday, because we don't find ourselves having to talk about exactly what we would have been, Lee, had he not been granted the playoff waiver.
No, you're absolutely right. We didn't need the waiver to muddy up the conversation with the racing. And we went through that a little bit at Gateway. We were so hoping to talk about what was going on the racetrack, what was going on with some of the teams, and then boom, it was kind of like we're discussing nothing but the waiver. So that was kind of like a huge bummer. But from waiver to win to points lead, what more could you ask for?
Points lead, that's another really important part, because Denny Hamlin blew up on lap 2.
Huge. I mean, first of all, nobody would have expected Denny Hamlin to blow up on lap 2, certainly not Denny Hamlin. And that allowed Larson to accumulate a lot of points, and obviously the win. And he has mentioned before, that getting that regular season championship is huge, because that gets you that 15 extra playoff points. And so, a week or two ago, he might have thought that was a moot point, but now that it's not, he really believes that his team can get that. It kind of made me giggle, because he said after the race, he said, my mind never wavered when it came to whether or not I could, get back to victory lane and all of this stuff. So, that I thought was kind of a funny play on words that he had.
Well, Hendrick was unusually quiet last week when the announcement was made. Rick Hendrick did release a statement, but other than that, you really didn't see much reaction. Kyle Larson gave a thumbs up emoji on social. So the media really got their hands on the Hendrick folks for the first time in Sonoma. Kyle Larson, I thought, downplayed the waiver significantly, said he wasn't really sweating it. It wasn't really on his mind. Obviously, he's happy he got it. Jeff Gordon, on the other hand, was like, no, I was sweating it a little bit. Like, this was a really big deal. I'm glad this is no longer a storyline. But what did you make of Hendrick's take on this story as it developed over the weekend?
I think very simply, you don't poke the bear. You're playing in someone else's playground. You know whose playground it is. And I think that's perhaps as zen as Larson is. Jeff Gordon has been down this path before. And he knows at the end of the day who calls the shots. And it's not Hendrick Motorsports, it's NASCAR. And I think that from a political standpoint, they handled it exceptionally well.
Yeah, I think it was, relief. Now that they know that they have that and they don't have to worry about it anymore, they could talk about it a little bit more freely, because you're right. You don't want to poke the bear. Whose playground you're playing in. And so it was an incredibly long time that NASCAR made them wait and ponder what was going to happen. And so, it was interesting to be able to hear from that post having the waiver issued, because they were able to speak a little bit more freely than they were before.
I'm glad Kyle Larson ultimately got the playoff waiver. I think it was the smart decision on the heels of a Sonoma win, and now we no longer have to talk about it. He's playoff eligible, gets the points. He takes the points lead, as we mentioned, over Denny Hamlin. We can talk the 5-team strategy and how they ultimately prevailed. Strategy was really all over the board, though, especially with all of those early yellows. Guys, we had 8 cautions through the first 2 stages. Now, to put that into context, the track record at Sonoma all time is 9. I mean, it was yellow after yellow after yellow. You said you were surprised by that, Alexis.
I was.
I kind of thought with the repave, there were so many unknowns going into this. And until the track walk but even then, like, simulator can't really give you a good feel of your brake markers, your entry points. Like, these guys were really figuring it out. Even after a 50-minute practice session, they wanted to get aggressive. And sometimes, they bit off a little bit more than they could chew, and it bit them. I mean, through the first 2 stages, you lost 50% of the Gibbs field. The Stewart-Haas cars, 75% of them were destroyed. Joey Logano, who started on the pole and had an exceptional race, he pits early, gets stuck mid-pack on a restart. He gets bit on the Briscoe wreck. I mean, you just had guys getting damage left and right.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I feel like for me, when you're talking about traditional repaves of ovals, right, that you typically see, in my opinion, more long green flag runs, that type of thing. And so I haven't seen as much of it on the road courses. So I was expecting kind of what you would expect on an oval. And I was expecting it to kind of go long green flag runs, especially with what we've seen at Sonoma in the past. However, you're right. People were pushing the limit. They were, you also had that new barrier in turn 11 that caused some issues. Ty Gibbs hit that and unfortunately ruined his day very early. So there were a lot of new elements that were placed this weekend that the drivers weren't used to having to battle. And so I think that was what was causing a lot. And then, going into the race, I feel also like a lot of the drivers and crew chiefs probably thought, well, we know how we're going to play this. We know exactly what strategy we're going to go into. And then yellow came and another yellow came. And all of that went out the window. And now they're kind of just all going off of the cuff. And that jumbled things up so much more.
Yeah.
I still promise you that if Joey Logano ever wins the pole and Paul Wolfe is his crew chief, they're not going to pit on lap 16 again.
No, that was...
Because
yeah.
it just seemed like the people that stayed out fared better at the end of that race. And, not everybody can come in and pit at the same time, and not everybody can stay out. But I just felt so bad for them. You thought, man, Logano's finally going to have a good finish. And boom, his day pretty much, got destroyed, like you said, at the back of the field.
A lot of us were interested on how the Fords were going to run, too, because the first 2 years in the next-gen car in Sonoma, I realized it was the old pavement. But you had a Chevrolet and a Toyota, and Joey Logano sits on the pole. Ultimately, Michael McDowell recovers for a second-place finish. Chris Buescher and another Ford finishing third. Ryan Blaney, who almost won last week, finishes seventh, and another Ford and Todd Gillen at 10th. Although it really messed up, I think, a good day for the 22. Ultimately, though, I do think the Fords had a good showing. Now, the results are going to tell you. We've had 2 road courses this year, COTA and Sonoma. Hendrick Motorsports has won both in William Byron and Kyle Larson. And who knows what would have been of Denny Hamlin's day, Ty Gibbs' day. But I thought great speed and great raceability for all 3 of our manufacturers. But yeah, you go back to the Logano thing and you think, man, if they could take that call back, they would.
What could have been?
Especially coming off the Xfinity Series race, where Ty Gibbs and his team did the exact same thing, got caught mid-pack and on a restart, got collected in a mess that wasn't his own doing, and really took the whole Ty Gibbs SVG showdown and made it a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about these races, though, is that hindsight's 20/20. Right. We can sit here and Monday morning quarterback all we want and say that was a terrible decision. And it was when you look at the results. But there have been situations also where short pitting has allowed you to flip a stage and then gain, track position later on in the race. I mean, we were even saying it on our broadcast, on the Performance Racing Network broadcast, that felt like at some point, if things played out the way that everybody thought they were going into the race, that you were going to have to short pit at some time to be able to find yourself up front. Obviously, we did not anticipate all the calamity that happened, and certainly a tough day for the 22 to be on the pole and then to find themselves. But I mean, look how many, you're right. Even the Toyotas and the Gibbs cars had, crazy day. It just seems like there was a lot of crazy forces that were happening at Sonoma yesterday, when you typically think of those races, especially in the next gen era, as being a little bit more calm. I felt like this one was a little bit more on the crazy side.
You think about how Denny's day started by blowing up on lap 2 and Truex's day by running out of gas on the final lap. That is a twist of the knife if you're Joe Gibbs Racing.
Yeah, and Ty Gibbs, unfortunately hitting that wall and taking himself out too. Christopher Bell finished 9th, so that was good. That was 1 out of 4.
The one shining moment. Yeah.
I know you've discussed the running out of fuel last week on track a lot between you and Larry McReynolds, but on the other side of that, as precise as these teams are in NASCAR, especially the good teams, and we've watched them. If you spend any time in the pits, you see the fuelers, they'll go in and they weigh out everything, and they know down to the ounce what they need to go the distance. And I'm just kind of curious to have 2 drivers who were in contention, first Blaney, now Truex, to have two weeks in a row run out of gas. What is going on with the cars that we don't know about. There has to be something, because that is just too bizarre what has happened 2 weeks in a row.
And to my knowledge, I don't think anybody ever, I know for sure Blaney was not told to save fuel, but to my knowledge, I don't think Truex was either. Like, I don't even think that they knew that they were that close to running out on fuel.
Yeah, Blaney certainly was just a miscalculation. They thought they had more in the tank than they actually did. We'll wait and see what the 19 team says ultimately was a deciding factor in running out of gas.